6. Thank you everyone for joining in. We're live on YouTube, and I'm Neeta Aneja, and I'm the founder of Trends Literature Series. I'm really excited today to host a conversation on the book, The Tiger, the Bear, and the Battle of Mahovann, with the very dynamic Akshay Manwani, who has already written 2 books on Indian cinema. He's a television MBA expert and a wildlife travel enthusiast and MBA from IMT. The book, in fact, has been published by Westland. It is available online and in the bookstores. And it's a story of self-belief in animal kingdom, a deep, enthralling tale set in the great Indian forest. It's a brilliant storytelling which keeps both children and adults engaged through adventure and emotions and makes us reflect upon different choices that we make every day. So welcome, Akshay, on our platform. It's so nice to have you with us today.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure, Neeta, to be a part of this session. And, thank you so much for Trends for doing this session. I look forward to discuss this book with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Same here. Really looking forward. So Akshay, your book definitely is it's kind of an insight into how your jungle adventures found a way into writing this book, The Tiger, the Bear, and the Battle of Mahovann. So tell us more about it. And I would say rather, please take us through the making of this book. How did you get interested in writing about such colorful animals?
The idea for the book came from a very simple, actually criticism, because like you said that, my 2 previous books have been on Hindi cinema. So वो जो subject है, my daughter is not very comfortable with that. I have written my first book on Hindi cinema was a biography of the poet songwriter Sahir Ludhianvi Saab, and the subject of my second book was the films of Nasir Hussain Saab. So now, when those books were published, the first book came out when she was roughly about 2 years old. The second book came out when she was about 6.5 years old. But really, I mean, she was not one at that age that you're going to make her watch these black and white films or the films of the 60s and 70s for her to appreciate. So we were actually on a trip to Kaziranga National Park in Assam during Diwali 2018. And when we were over there, she made this sudden comment. We were waiting actually for a rhinoceros to come out so that I could photograph it. And she suddenly made this comment while we were waiting for the rhino to come out that, Dad, why do you write these boring film books? Why don't you write something more interesting about nature and wildlife and all that? And I have always been very interested in wildlife. And, about 5 years ago you can say in the summer of 2017, I started, I had a camera, I had a DSLR camera, but I never really used it in the way that it was meant to be used. But from the summer of 2017, I started embracing wildlife photography in a more serious way. So, a combination of 2 things. One was that I had authored a few books, and then I was doing these trips into the jungle since 2017 every year. For the last 4.5 years, I've done it quite seriously. Even the pandemic could not slow down my pace till a certain point. Again, in the last 3-4 months, I've not been able to go. The last time I went was to Kanha during Diwali of 2021. But up to that point, I was traveling quite a bit. The wildlife season in India is roughly from mid-September to about mid-June. And then the jungles close. I mean, in most parts of the country, they are closed between mid-June to, let's say, mid-September, that 3-month period. But I have done a lot of travels and, I still have a lot of places to go, but quite a substantial amount of travel. So I thought that, in my travels, there were so many new species that I came to know of. For example, there is an animal called the lion-tailed macaque, which I had never heard of also. I always prided myself on watching these shows on National Geographic and Discovery Channel. But these shows are largely, about safaris in Africa and South America or other, European, Scandinavian countries. When they come to India, they are only focused on the tiger and the elephant and maybe the rhino. They really don't provide anything more beyond that. So as I started traveling and I started realizing that India has an incredible biodiversity. Like if you go to the little Rann of Kutch in Ahmedabad, in near Ahmedabad in Gujarat, it has, in this dry, scrubby region, which is the little Rann of Kutch, it has this beautiful animal called the wild ass, right? Similarly, if you go down south to the Western Ghats, Kerala, some parts of Tamil Nadu, you will see this creature called the lion-tailed macaque, right, which is a species of monkey. Similarly, if you go to the northeast, there's something called the Hollock gibbon, which is a very unique ape species, right? And it is not found anywhere else in the world, right? So I started appreciating it, and I said, why do somebody like me who takes a certain amount of pride in being a wildlife enthusiast, I don't even know about this. And then when I started thinking about it, I realized that when we are growing up as children, and even I would ask you also to think back, when you learn the alphabet in English, for example, and you have those initial books where the letter is this big and the picture alongside is this big. It will be L for lion, and M for monkey, and B for bear, and T for tiger. Yeah, C for cheetah. And wo wahin pe, you're it, in a sense, while it is educating you ki, learn the alphabet and this is the name, this is the letter with which this animal begins, it is also limiting, right? Because M for monkey doesn't mean anything. There is no such thing. When you go out into the wild, you cannot say कि वो monkey है. तो सभी monkeys हैं, but उसमें there are subspecies. There is the lion-tailed macaque, there is the Hollock gibbon, there is the bonnet macaque, there is the rhesus macaque, there is the Himalayan langur, there is the Central Indian langur, there is the Nilgiri langur. Now, it's like saying that thing that we do as a society, we bracket. We say, oh, they are all from South India. Now, what does that even mean, right? Today, people get offended, and rightfully so, because we ought to educate ourselves about the person that we are meeting, right? It's inadequate for me to label somebody who comes from Bihar and UP as the same demographic, right? The people from Bihar have their own cultural lineage. The people from Uttar Pradesh have their own cultural lineage, right? Because there is a certain meeting point in the kind of language they speak, that doesn't mean anything, right? So similarly, in the animal world, you need to understand that a Nilgiri langur and a Himalayan langur, while the second the second name, the langur, is common, they actually look totally different. The Himalayan langur has a white fur coat with a black face, which is traditionally what langurs look like. But even within what the traditional langur looks like, the Himalayan langur has a much thicker coat, because it is for the colder climate, not what you will see in Ranthambore and central Indian jungles like Bandhavgarh and Kanha. But the Nilgiri langur has the opposite color scheme. It has a black coat with a whitish mane, right? It's an inversion, roughly, you can say. So the idea was to tell children a story which has a start, a middle, and an end. It has a plot. There is a hero, there is a villain, there are some good people, there are some bad people, there are some advisors to the good people, and there are some advisors to the bad people. But use that story to educate children about these various animal species. So if you look at the book and you have a copy of the book, you will see that at the end of the book, there is a 6-page glossary about the various animal characters that are there in the book, right? Yeah. So we've given two lines of general information about what these animals are. Where do they come from? What are the subspecies that they belong to? Or what is the umbrella species they belong to? So the idea was essentially tell a story, but at the same time, educate children on Indian animals. My story does not have giraffes and zebras and orangutans, creatures which are not found in India, right? The idea was to tell something about the biodiversity, incredible biodiversity of our motherland.
So very right. It is very educative. And I would say that this is kind of a byproduct of your ambition, which you have said somewhere, that you want to visit all the wildlife sanctuaries and all the national parks. And your knowledge itself shows and reflects about your love for the wildlife and wanting to know about their natural habitat. I remember when I was much younger, my father got me an encyclopedia on animals. Right. And I still remember the beautiful pictures that I used to see and the stories that I used to read. And I'm sure here your book will really, because it has such wonderful illustrations also, and about these 2 pages, the knowledge that you've given. I'm sure you're so right. A story, but it is very informative, and it is going to teach people a lot about wildlife. So,
Yes.
coming to your book, when you said that this was also born out of the fact that your daughter said that, why do you write such boring
Yes.
books on cinema? Though I'm sure, I mean, they are very interesting. But yes, that was from the children's perspective. But then, what is her response now? Has she read the book?
She has read the book. So, again, that's very interesting. My daughter is a voracious reader, okay? And
Okay.
much more than me, actually, my wife gets the credit for that because, in our house, I do the writing. My wife actually does the reading. She has a far broader palette and wider, uh, I don't know wider, but certainly she reads a lot more than I do. Okay, and she has passed on that same habit to our daughter also. I am a little bit of a scatterbrain in that, someday at some point in time there is one kind of thing that interests me, and then maybe after doing that for 3 months I'm like, yaar, ye bahut ho gaya, and let me go on and do that, right? So she has managed to give our daughter this incredible reading appetite, and she's a voracious reader. So when I was writing the book, I would give her, like, I think I first time I gave her the book was after I had written about 4 or 6 chapters and all that. And so I gave her 6 chapters, I gave her 10 chapters, and then I gave her the whole, or maybe I gave her 6 chapters to read and then I gave her the whole thing to read. And she was delighted by it, and that. But I must also tell you that she read then a later draft where I made some changes, and then finally, of course, when the book came out, I don't think she read when the book came out, but she read one of the final manuscripts, where the final book is not very different from one of the final manuscripts that went into the editing cycle. But what she initially loved, she was, I could see her, and again, I was using it as a testing
Yeah,
exercise.
sure.
If she is liking it, then maybe yes, I'm able to engage with a child, right? Now, this is not to say that she's representative of all children out there, but getting just some kind of feeler that it's working or not working. But again, the children are brutally honest, and you have to appreciate that about them. So when after the book was in works for about 2.5 years. So maybe when I showed her the first, like I said, 4 or 6 chapters, that must have been in the first 6 months of working on it. So at that time she was loving it. When she read the full book, when all 13 chapters were written, she loved it and all. But by the time the book got published, or she read one of the final drafts, as I said, a 2.5 year period had passed by, right? And in that time she had read so much more, right? uh, I don't even know what are the authors she's reading, but she's already finished Harry Potter and all. Usne bahut pehle khatam kar diya. She's 11 and a half. I
Okay.
think she was done with Harry Potter by the time she was 8 or 9. She was done with it.
Lovely.
Her by the end of it, she's the last feedback which she gave me was that your book is, I remember it just like I remember when she told me ki, you write such boring film books. It's a remark that has stayed in my head. This time it was, your book is it's not great, it's good,
Oh,
right? Which I'm using as a challenge now. So I asked her, I said, so what do you mean by that? And she said, see, in some places your humor is too obvious. You have to learn to be a little subtle.
oh my God.
So,
Imagine.
to that level. And again, I am not trying to that, but she has, her mother's sensibility in literature. So now
You're
actually
taking it seriously.
I have always been my wife is my worst critic. Like, every time I feel good when I come out of my study and I say I have written a good page, a good chapter, a good book, I am very scared of giving it. I'm less scared of giving it to a genuine book critic as much as I'm scared of giving it to my wife,
Oh
because
my God.
immediately I'm brought down to earth. But it's not coming from any other place, but because my wife has very good taste in literature. So that was one of the, I think, common points in, ours is a love marriage. So I think that was one of the things that we had in common.
Lovely. I think that really works, when you're writing, and if you have a regular critic of your work, at least
Yes.
you know where you're drawing the line and where you have to improve. That's fantastic. And, coming to your book, one of the very important things, as I just mentioned before, is also the illustrations that are
Yes.
there in the book. And it is really making it very interesting. And you've mentioned also in your acknowledgement the exemplary work of the brilliant illustrator, as you say,
Yeah.
Devashri Damodre.
Yeah.
So I also agree after seeing the book and after going through it that her work is absolutely inspiring. So how much part do you think an effective illustration
Hmm.
works in terms of children books?
See, again, this is it's a difficult question because there are several parts to it. See, uh, again, let's go back to those children's books that we read when we are, or we are read to when we are 4 or 5 years old, right? And in a lot of those books, the animals are exaggerated appearances, because you are trying to excite the child. You don't want to give him a realistic scene, right? So the lion will be shown in a certain funny way, the giraffe will be shown in a certain funny way. uh, my idea was, like I told you at the very beginning, was to educate. Right now, when you are educating, at least in my head, and like I said, this is not a book for 4 5 year olds, right? This is a book for 8 plus. It is, in a sense, if you're familiar with Enid Blyton, it is marrying the length of an Enid Blyton famous five mystery book with illustrations. The Enid Blyton books don't have illustrations in them, at least the five find outers or famous five and all, but they are roughly about 200 to 20 pages. So my book without the illustrations is roughly the same length, about 220 pages or so. And then there are about 30 40 illustrations, including the glossary. So I wanted to have it in that structure. Now, the reason, because it is of that length, so, the age group also went up. When the age group went up, I said, I don't want exaggerated animal appearances. Now, why did I say that? Lion, tiger, तो फिर भी लोगों को समझ में आ जाएगा. But if I were to show a wild ass from the Little Ran of Kutch in an exaggerated way, children would never for the life of them understand what is this creature actually looking like. Because even when our parents take us for a holiday, you live in the northern part of the country, I live in Mumbai, we generally go to the more popular jungles, right? Ranthambore, Corbett, Bandhavgarh, Kanha. In Maharashtra, Tadoba and Pench are very famous. Kaziranga you might go to if you are not intimidated by the travel to Guwahati and the journey from there after. But those are where you go, and in those jungles, what do you see? Tiger hai, elephant hai. कुछ jungles में तो elephant भी नहीं है. Outside of Corbett, बांधवगढ़ कान्हा में तो elephants नहीं है, Ranthambore में नहीं है. तो अब वो टाइगर तो आप you will see it in whether you see it in reality or the books, everybody knows what a tiger looks like, but you will not know what a lion-tailed macaque looks like. One of the key species in the book is a animal called the Ceylon bay owl, right? So my brief to my illustrator was very clear from the beginning. I want realistic scenes. I would give her my photographs and tell her that the illustration has to be similar to the creature in the photograph, right? We do not want exaggerated artwork or stylistic artwork in terms of not that she was a Gond artist, or I didn't want anything in that sense which was stylistic. It had to be real, right? Now the challenge for Devashri was, as you have seen, the illustrations are black and white. I would have loved to do color, but uh, Westland accepted this proposal. They were very good to me. And the editor over there, Vidhi Bhargav, her name is, she told me, she advised me, she said, Akshay, see, you have to understand your ambition is to put out the illustrations in color. But the moment you put it out in color, the cost of the book will, it will become, we won't even be able to produce it. And not just us, nobody else will produce it, because color means a different quality of paper, right? So then your entire ambition is defeated. And she told me, she gave me the confidence. She said, look, even we do a lot of black and white books, or books which have black and white illustrations, and they do work, right? So believe me, put your trust in black and white and go ahead with it. So we did that. Now the challenge for Devashri was that she had to show these animals for whatever they were in reality, with color and all that, in black and white. So that's where she showed her brilliance and her genius, that with different shades of black, a lighter black, a gray, a white, a bright white, she was able to create different moods, different, you had to show morning, day, evening, sometimes according to where the scene was placed. In one of the illustrations in chapter 3, you will see a starry sky, right? Whereas in another illustration, you will see, a kind of a foggy, cloudy feel. Now that's basically how moods are being created, even though you are actually only in black and white. But this is about the talent. Okay, talent many people have. I think what worked with me with Devashri very well is that she was extremely disciplined. I myself am very disciplined, and I love people who are disciplined. I don't care so much. I mean, it's great if you have talent, and we need talent, but discipline is a very important quality that I feel between the two, it's harder to get disciplined people than people who are just talented. So in Devashri's case, the first, she did this over a three and a half month project. The first month and a half, though, it went off like, she gave herself entirely to this project. But from the middle of the second month, she was joining a 2-year academic course for interior designing. So you will not believe it. She would take her briefs from me at 9 or 10 every night, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. We would have an hour-long discussion and all, one image at a time. And then the following day, she would give me a draft, same time, and then take another 2 days to complete it, or maybe 1 day to complete it. So, working through the night while balancing an academic course where she's boarding, she's not a day scholar, to juggle all that between her assignments and all that, it was amazing with the kind of exemplary dedication that she showed.
Absolutely, and definitely, and it really is a very outstanding part of the book too. Apart from obviously the beautiful storyline, and it is, and as Vidhi said somewhere, and I read that this book caters to everyone from 8 plus to 108 years, right? So why do you think? I mean, I know, I mean, I couldn't put the book down, but uh, why do you say that the adults will also be finding it equally interesting? I mean, coming from the author.
Because like I said, that it has it's like a regular plot, right? It has a start, it has a middle, it has an end. Now just because there are animal characters in it, and the language is fairly easy, therefore you might be misled into believing ki nahi yaar, ye to bachcho ki kitab hai. But it's not like that. There are some complicated issues in the book. Now, for example, that Mint review that I was talking to you about before this session started, that Mint has given it a very generous review. And again, I don't know the reviewer from Adam, right? But this lady has actually, she's put it out there that there are a lot of life lessons in the book, right? Or it comes from, it's also in some ways there are layers in the story. So it's not a straightforward story. When a animal or the animals are behaving in a certain way, I have given them a backstory. They are not just acting without any reason. There is some incident in the past. They have felt wronged. They have felt aggrieved. Somebody has to fulfill a wish. Somebody has to fulfill a promise, and which is why he or she is put in a difficult spot. And in that sense, it borrows from a lot of literature, even films, and it has come out in that way. So I genuinely feel, yes, I was the one who first said that it's a children's book, but it was my editor again, Vidhi Bhargav, who she cautioned me. She told me one day very sternly after the book was published कि आप ये जाते हुए सबको बता रहे हैं कि ये it's for 8 to 12 years old. It's not 8 to 12 years old. It's 8 and above. Even adults can enjoy the book.
No. They definitely can, because your book is all about self-belief and facing up to unsurmountable odds, as you mentioned. Right. And I read somewhere that it's a primer to India's incredible wildlife diversity and a riveting tale about the choices one can make and one should make. You have made a very, very strong statement in the book, which is that war brings with it catastrophic results. Even if it is ultimately results in some kind of narrow definition of victory. So please justify your statement. I know I've read the book, but yes, for people. So it is a very deep statement to make.
Yeah, it is a dialogue which is made by, or a comment which is made by one of the characters to the hero of the story at shortly before the climax. Because the hero is grappling with, what should I do? Should I declare an all-out war against the villain and his forces, or should I, can I handle this in any other way? And this moment actually, it comes out of Neeta ji, a moment from the Mahabharata. Arjun has this same dilemma when he fights the battle of Kurukshetra, and it is amongst my I would rate it as the most the finest piece of literature I have read in my life, right? I'm not going to go into the Bhagavad Gita part of it, but just the complexities of the narrative, right? I have read several versions also of the Mahabharata, in the sense that I have read one version which was written by Chitra Devakurni Banerjee about then there is a version I read as a child, which was my first interaction with the Mahabharata, was R.K. Lakshman's, R.K. Narayan's, telling of the tale. So in all these things, there are so many layers and complexities, and that moment in the battle or before the battle, it is so interesting because he ultimately decides to participate in it, but I don't know if see he they don't the Pandavas don't know that. They know that they are going to be they are on the right side of dharma, so they have to win. The Lord Krishna is on their side, they will win, right? And therefore they know that when he agrees to battle, he agrees that I will be taking down my grandsire, which is Bhishma Pitama. I will be taking down my guru, which is Dronacharya. I will be taking down my cousins, which are Duryodhan and Dushasan and all the others, right? But I always wonder that if somebody had told them that, after this battle, you will lose your own children, right? That Bhim will lose Ghatotkach, that Arjun and all the other Pandavas lose their 5 sons, because I think it is Ashwathama who, in the night he kills them, that part at the end. I think maybe they would have, because to lose your own child is a very, very what do you call, painful experience, right? And we see it, when he loses Abhimanyu, for example, in the battle, how much he grieves. I mean, Bhim is ready to, he loses his anger when he sees Lord Krishna smiling at Ghatotkach's dead body. So, which is why the question always remains, even on a larger, outside of the Mahabharata, ki hum jab ye, when we say that we have won a certain war, or so and so country defeated another country in war. Yes, maybe you protected your nation's borders, but there is a massive price that you pay. Fathers and mothers lose their children. Brothers and sisters lose their siblings. So at what cost? Therefore that dilemma is there. And again, this comes back to your earlier question, that in terms of whatever is the climax, one has to read the book, but it is that kind of narrative element that I wove into the book, which does not limit it to children alone. Even an adult will perhaps, I hope, will be forced to introspect and ask himself or herself. Like recently, there was that movie that had come out 4 years ago, Christopher Nolan's movie, which was on that, I forget the name of the movie, but it is about, about World War II, I think, where they are retreating back, and, the number of dead bodies, etc. And, again, the question is that ultimately, what is the price? Can we get back those people that we have lost? I mean, what are you going to do with the kingdom? What are you going to do with the kingdom when you don't have your successors only to enjoy it with? So you don't. It's like that. So
I know back then, if they had introspected, Mahabharata wouldn't have taken place.
I mean,
we wouldn't have lost so many family members.
Yes. And I always feel, and again, it's a brilliant story, because there are so many layers. I mean, for example, I have never seen Duryodhan purely as an all-out evil person. I do feel somewhere even for him, because there is an act of nobility he does in that moment when he adopts, or he offers his friendship to Karn, whose antecedents are not known. Right now, whether you can sit and debate कि वो selfishly कर रहा था कि unselfishly कर रहा था, right? But in that moment, Karan got a sense of belonging, which he didn't have. Right. So again, it's a very complicated and complex narrative, and which is why I say it's one of the best pieces of literature, because it forces you to think.
Yeah, because when I read that line, I felt that it's a very important line, and it also is reflective of your own views. In
Yes.
fact, we did a book, Mahabharata Unraveled by Amy Ganatra on this platform, and also Abhimanyu by Deepak Emar. You must read them.
Okay. Okay.
Now, I will let Diya take the conversation forward. She's the co-founder of Trends, and she's read the book, and she would like to talk to you about it.
Hi, Dia. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm very fine. Please tell me.
Yes. Sir, so first of all, I have to say that I absolutely love the interesting educative aspect that you have brought in the group, in the book, sorry. And that is something that genuinely grabbed my attention. So I had a question related to that only.
Please
So I
ask.
loved the aspect that you paid attention to details in the book. Like, for example, in the chapter, I believe it was named The Great Escape. You've talked about how woodpeckers would talk in code and how Bitumba used the technique to convey his messages.
Yeah.
Honestly, for me, these little details had an impact as they established a connection between me, the characters, the book, the backstories, and I got more interested as I read them. So you might have answered this question a little, but if you have anything more to add to it, I wanted to ask what gave you the idea to delve into the smallest and smallest of details, and how did you proceed to do that?
See, Dia, again, this is the first time I was writing fiction. Both my previous books are non-fiction, so in that sense, it was very different from writing. An unrelated question that somebody asked me, or people have asked me in since I've been, this book has come out, is how much did I struggle with writing a work of fiction? And honestly speaking, I did not struggle. I mean, I don't mean this as a boast or anything, but I was, many years ago means, let's say 7-8 years ago or 5 years ago, whenever somebody would tell me, have you thought about fiction? And I would say, no, not really. I don't think I have it in me to write fiction. Imagination is, I'm very good at research, and if you tell me to go and do research on something or someone that I'm really interested about, I will give you, like, I know my effort will be better than anybody else, right? So when I started doing this, the only thing that I had in my mind was that I'm giving people a scene. So if you notice, in every chapter is broken down into 4 or 5 sections. Like, there are 3 dots that come after one section is over. So for me, actually, everything was, is it visual enough? Is it, because I wrote it from the point of view of, what if, somebody were to pick this up and develop it into a film or something. And also the second part of it was, you cannot, suppose if I were to say that, he told it, he told somebody and somebody told them, you have to make it interesting for your reader. Right now, that basically is, it's like Morse code, right? So when a message is relayed between spies, right, from another location to another location, from one nation to another nation, they use Morse code and all those techniques to pass on the information. So I thought, can we this particular idea came to me, can we do this, something like this, with the creatures in the animal kingdom? And this woodpecker thing is a very common sight. If you go to the jungle, tuck, 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 and it's loud enough. So I thought, that sounds like Morse code only. But if you see, most of the moments, the scenes in the book, the scenarios, they are actually, I wrote them in such a way that it has to be audio-visual enough, right? And I made an attempt to make things interesting. Like one particular character in the book, I don't know if you noticed, he reads very, 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 very slowly, right? Or he talks very, 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 very slowly, right? But he, on the other side, he's an expert martial arts artist, right? So again, now if I were just to present him as a normal character, you would not remember him now. Now, because there is that aspect of his character, you remember him. somebody becomes an uncle even though he's small in size, somebody becomes an aunt to these smaller tiger cubs and she's very big in size. Those opposites, they make it interesting for children, because when they see that first of all, how can an elephant be an aunt like figure to two tiger cubs, or how can a porcupine, which is much smaller than tigers, be an uncle to them? But if I were to make a tiger only a tiger's uncle, then उसमें कोई मजा नहीं है. मजा तो तब आता है कि जब कोई अनजान आदमी, in real life, when someone unrelated brings you up, right? That is what makes it interesting. Of course, my mother loves me, my father loves me, and they bring me up. That is the normal course of events in life. But the interesting thing is when an outsider, like, I don't know if you have seen a movie called Lion. Have you seen that movie called Lion?
I don't think so, no.
A few years ago, it was at the Oscar Awards and all that. It stars, that Australian actor, I forget her name, very big actor. I mean, you can look it up, Lion. It's a true story about a child who gets separated from his family, and he's adopted by Australian citizens coming into India they adopt him from an orphanage and they raise him in Australia. And then 20 years later, 25 years later, he actually reunites with his parents in India. And this is pre-internet era and all that. I mean, when he gets separated from his family, there's no internet and all. Because he remembers some part of his childhood, he uses Google Maps and all that to relocate his parents. Now, there would be no story now if he was brought up by his own family. The thing comes in when he's brought up by Australian parents. So, I mean, just, you have to make your narrative look uninteresting, which is why there were these small things that I tried to do by, bringing in these things.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Like I read the book and all of that actually captured my attention a lot. So that makes a lot of sense. So coming to the second question. So you were talking about like how it was writing a fiction for you. So obviously you're somebody who's very passionate and very enthusiastic about wildlife. So how was it? Did you find it easy to translate your passion into the book?
No, it wasn't difficult. In fact, my problem was that I wanted to fill in more characters, like 15, 20 characters more. Like, when I started writing the book, I had a Word document, 2 Word documents. One Word document was, मुझे ये plot point डालना है, I want to put this plot point, this plot point, this plot. So as I kept incorporating plot points, I kept knocking them off. But there were some plot points which I wrote and then I had to delete them because I was not able to resolve them, right? So that wasn't an issue. The second part of it was, the second Word document was, wow, I've seen so many animal species. Let me put all of them into the book, right? I found that beyond a point, it's unnecessary, right? I'm diluting. You see, as a writer, writing is not just this. I have said previously also, after I wrote my, film books, my biggest learning about being a writer is that not only is it a very lonely profession, because you are sitting alone in your room, hopefully nobody is disturbing you, and you're typing away at your computer, or you're making your notes and refining your thoughts. So that, in that sense, it's very lonely. Nobody can come and help you, right? It's not like you are working in a corporate organization where you have colleagues and you have team members, and or even as a doctor, when you are performing surgery, you have somebody to help you out with your surgical process. Here you are doing everything, right? So you have, so one part of it is that it's a lonely process, but the other part of it is that it's also a terribly selfish process, right? And by that, what I mean is, you have read the final part of the book, right? Whatever has come out, you don't know what all information I had put in and I have deleted, and that is only for my benefit. Now you will say, what big deal does it make? I have read the final product, no? But this is a work of fiction. In non-fiction, for example, in my film books, there are like maybe chunky pieces of information which the editor has said, this is unnecessary, it's not wanted, let's delete it. But those have some interesting pieces of trivia, which only I know, and the editor knows, who decided to chop it off, right? So which is why I say it's also a very selfish process, because ultimately it's you are using only 70% of what I had written. And therefore, this long list of characters I had, I chopped, I changed, I didn't use some. Only I know that, right? But realistically speaking, I didn't struggle. Could I have done a better job? Yes. Always I feel this about any of my books. Could I have done a better job in writing the book? There are some things I could have done better, which I realized after the book came out. And it's still very recent. Maybe after 2 more months, I'll feel I could have done something more. But I already know that there are some things that I could have done better. But in terms of writing the plot, I did not struggle.
There was actually a question from Sanvi Agarwal. She's in 11th grade too. And her question was that, do you plan on coming up with any sequel or perhaps any other book? Is there any plan of action?
I want to write another wildlife book.
That you're passionate about. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to write another wildlife book. In fact, to tell you a slightly funny episode. So, for example, I know that I want to write another wildlife book which is based in a particular area, right? Because the animals and birds of that region, or that very big vast region, literally very few people know about it. Like hardcore nature wildlife enthusiasts know about it, right? And I want to come up with a story over there. So now you will be thinking, yaar, ye to ulta hai कि इनके पास स्टोरी नहीं है, इनके पास सेटिंग है, right? So it's like, many years ago, before I got married, my younger brother was getting married before me. There was a very big uproar in my family because my family, my aunts and uncles were saying ki, you should be ashamed. Your younger brother is getting married before you. What the hell are you doing? So I was at a party where, I think it was some pre-engagement party of my younger brothers. And one of my family friends, my aunt, caught hold of me and she said, what are you doing? You're older and you are not getting married. You should get married now. So I told her, I said, Auntie, don't worry. Now things are under control. And I have the most important information for you as far as my marriage is concerned. So she said, what? You have found a girl? Good. I'm so happy for you. So I said, no, Auntie, I haven't found a girl. I have found the tie that I'm going to wear at my wedding. Now that I have found the tie that I'll wear at my wedding, from here, everything becomes easier, right? So the same thing with this. I know I want to do a book in that particular region discussing the wild species of that region. From there, I think I'll be able to carve out a story.
That actually sounds very exciting. I'm already very curious to know.
Okay, great.
So there was another question.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to budding authors?
Okay, so 2-3 things. First of all, I would say that everyone has to write what they believe in, right? Don't just write because somebody gave you an idea कि देखो यार इस पे किसी ने लिखा नहीं है तो आप इस पे लिख दो यार, this is a great idea, you should believe in the idea, right? Even if it is a book which nobody else will believe in, okay, but you believe in, you should go ahead and write it. And don't worry about things like how much will it sell, will I become a bestseller, will somebody, if you're writing fiction, will somebody pick up the audiovisual rights? All those are later discussions. Pehle, to go back to that moment in the Mahabharata where Lord Krishna tells Arjun, apna karm karo, phal ki chinta mat karo, right? So do what you believe in and don't worry about subsidiary things or ancillary things or whatever comes after that. First you do that. Be prepared that it is a journey. Okay, I think when you finish writing a book and it gets published, you enjoy the journey. I have enjoyed the journey of all my books. They've all been very different experiences for me. It's much like a parent raising his or her 3 children. So in that sense, each one of them provides a different experience. When I say I didn't struggle with the plot of this book, it doesn't mean that I did not have other struggles with the book. I had, but those struggles were different from the struggles I had for my second book. And the struggles that I had for my second book were very different from the struggles I had for my first and third book, right? So each book will, take you on its own journey. You will have a different feeling about it once it is out there. And the last thing that I will tell you, which is common to anything you set out to do, whether you become a surgeon, whether you are running trends series, or whether you have become an artist, you have to be passionate about what you're doing. You have to work hard towards it. Nobody becomes an author just by sitting over there and working on their own. The best of authors have a great discipline. Even those who don't have great discipline, ultimately, to bring their book to a certain form and shape, they go through many edits, the multiple edit queries that the editor will have, and you have to be prepared to go through that process. You cannot be like कि मैंने ये दे दिया अब बस इसी से खुश रहो. That is, you have to be prepared to get feedback. Maybe your first book will not be your best book and the critics may pan it. You have to be prepared and learn. I am never happy after, like I tell people, I'm very embarrassed by what I had written in my first book. Very embarrassed. I look back at it and I don't want to look at it. Yes, people still come back to me and say, what a great job you did. But I know what deficiency that book had. I know what deficiency this book has. I know what is lacking in my second book. It's like any mother, she knows what is lacking in her children. Gandhari knew what was lacking in Duryodhan, right? But she was not going around telling the world na ki usne galat kiya hai. So you have to always be aware of the limitations of your books and get better.
Yeah. So yeah, it's very important to be passionate and take everything as a learning experience. And well, you can better yourself from that in the whatever your next endeavor is. So I actually had one last question.
Sure.
So what type of books do you like reading? And have you ever drawn inspiration from any other writers? And has there been any specific writer that you have resonated with?
So I was telling Neeta ji, just in the initial part of our conversation, that I actually read all kinds of stuff. Like I have written a children's book now, but recently the book that I'm reading is The Silent Coup by Josie Joseph. Okay. The next book that I have on my side table is a book about an NBA. It's from one of the NBA teams of the 1990s, right? One of the best books I have read in recent years was Sujata Gidla's Ants Among Elephants, right? Which is it's non-fiction about the plight of Dalits in India. I read fiction, I read non-fiction, I read sports books, I read as an adult, I was reading when I was in my mid-20s. I was buying Harry Potter books with the enthusiasm of a child. I skipped work to finish books 5, 6, 7 within the first day of them coming out. Right? I skipped work. I'm genuinely admitting this to you. If somebody tells me there is another version of the Mahabharata and somebody else's voice coming out, I will read it. I don't have a favorite author per se, but I do like, and I mean, again, this is not to say a writing style, but no, I won't say I have been inspired by, but I think it's good to, draw inspiration from or see what you like in a particular author's work and just do your best. There is so much. I can't even say that I only read non-fiction or that I read fiction. What I can tell you is I'm a very slow reader.
Lovely. Thank you, dear. That was great and really enjoyed listening to both of you. So I must tell everyone to definitely read the book, The Tiger, the Bear, and the Battle of Mahovann. Before we go, I have one last question, which has been weighing on my mind for a long time. A role of publishers.
Yeah.
I feel that role of publishers and their team for an author is one of the most important link between him and his work that is produced with so much of passion, so much of discipline, and so much of hard work.
Yeah.
So how has your experience been in the whole process? At this time with Westland, you've been with Westland, and I've done a lot of books with them, and I feel that they're a great publishing house.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
how has your experience been in the entire writing process, coordinating, and how you as an author feel that the right publisher is really very important to take a
Oh,
book?
it's very important, and like I was telling Dia just a little while ago, that this is not to say that this book has not had its difficulties, and one of the difficulties was getting a publisher, because people bracket you. So I was bracketed as somebody who does books on Hindi cinema. Now the question is, why is he suddenly attempting this? So I must have gone to 4 or 5 publishers, and one of the people that I spoke to was Kartika, who is the editor at Westland, and I just called her up to take her advice that what should I do. I have a manuscript, and I'm wanted illustrated because it's for children and it's educational and all. And she put me on immediately when she heard from me, because she was also the chief editor at HarperCollins, who published my first 2 books. So generally, I have always had easy enough access to her, and she's been very kind to me. And she put me on to Vidhi Bhargav, who commissioned my book. And like I told you, that episode of when we were having this conversation about should it be in color, should it be in black and white, and she said, Akshay, you have such a good story. Don't worry about the color and non-color. Color will not work because the production cost will make it prohibitive. Let's do it in black and white, and we want to do it in black and white. And just for, again, I'm not a first-time author, but I was a first-time children's author. So I was just glad that the book got a home, and a home, not just any other publisher, but Westland, where one of the things which I've realized with them is that when the book came out, it was immediately available in UK and US because of Amazon's might in the distribution space. So even if one copy is ordered by somebody in the US or UK, it's not like it gets exported out of here and then imported in there and all. No, the in very layman's terms, so the manuscript is available online or whatever in their shared that resource center, and you can print it. Gets printed locally immediately and delivered within a day or two. So I was having people telling me within a couple of days of me announcing that the book is out, people sending me photographs from the US and UK saying that we've got it for our child and we've got it for our friend's child. And I've not had that experience with let's say my previous publishers. So I mean, Vidhi has been a constant support. Even now, the lady who's doing the marketing, Shweta Bhagat, she has been the kind of opportunities that she's got me, school interactions, her colleague in Bombay, Divya Shah, school interactions. I mean, I've had so many school interactions. I have another school interaction tomorrow. I have another school interaction 2 weeks from now. It's really they've put in a lot of effort, and I really don't have complaints. I know I need to do better in terms of telling my next story whenever that happens. But you of course know that Westland, I mean, the recent announcement that came in, one hopes that all these people, their future is secured, or it works out well for them in the future. But they've been very good to me. I'm really thankful for them for giving this book a home.
Very right. And I really thank Westland and Shweta Bhagat for making this conversation happen. And we really enjoyed every bit of it. And I really want everyone to really read this book. I'm sure you'll have a great time like I did. And it is for anyone who's about 8 till 108 as well.
Yes.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure talking to you. And I wish you all the luck with this writing of yours and with your future writings as well.
Thank you so much, Neeta, and thank you so much for all those people who very patiently heard me out. And I hope everyone will get their hands on the book, if not for themselves, for their children, for their nephews and nieces. And it is available on Amazon and other online platforms, even in the Kindle form, as well as internationally. So you can go ahead and place your order, or go to your nearest bookstore and pick up The Tiger, the Bear, and the Battle for Mahovann. So thank you so much once again, Neeta, and it was a pleasure interacting with you.
And I'm going to show everyone the book.
Yes,
yes.
Here it is.
Yes, great. Thank you everyone for joining in.
Thank you.
And please do subscribe to our YouTube channel, Trends Literature Series, and we have many more authors coming in on our platform.